Alright guys, I'm back again, four-wheeler doctor, working on the motor in that little DS90. That's one of the X models. Really doesn't matter. I think the motors are the same on the regular or the X. And this is the one that had the transmission issues. Broke some teeth off of this gear here and the gear that it meshed up to here. And also had this bearing on this shaft here that had a bad wobble to it. I actually knocked it out before I turned the camera on, but just going to show how to replace these parts. Stick this side cover up back on and throw it back on the bike. This is about a 2008 model or so, and just got some parts in. I'm going to throw them on real quick. It's just pretty easy as far as the repair goes, so it shouldn't take long to get this back together. Like I said, this thing had some pretty bad wobble to it. So I'm going to replace that bearing. What you had to do is it just has a snap ring that held it on. It actually was that way down here, but I popped that snap ring off and the bearing will actually just slide off the shaft at that point. So you put the new bearing on, slide the snap ring back on, and tap it back in the hole there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll jump on taking this gear apart. Also guys, I didn't add, I have another video out there of the removal and tear down of this motor. If y'all want to check that out, I can post a link to that. And so I got this bearing beat back in there. It's actually a whole lot tighter than it was before. That didn't have anything to do with what the damage here, but I just figured I'd go ahead and replace it while I had it tore apart. Alright, let me get this bearing off of here and we'll move on. I'll actually give you a step by step once I get over here and figure out what I got to do. There's also a nut, a bolt, 10 millimeter bolt that goes in here with a washer on it that actually holds that bearing and shaft in there. So it didn't have Loctite on it when I took it out, but I put a dab of Loctite on it just to make sure it didn't back out of there. And man, this thing will not start in there. There it goes. So just tighten that down pretty much till it bottoms out. Alright, now on this other shaft I got to replace. This is the output shaft gear. It's got another snap ring on it and a seal. Not the big snap ring, the small one on the inside should be the one we take out. So pull that out of there, and this is actually where the sprocket goes that runs the chain. If I can do this one-handed, look at that. Y'all can only imagine what I can do with two hands if I could do all that with one hand. So take the hammer, tap that thing out of there. It's not pressed in or anything. I think I'm hitting something on the back side. Alright. Shoot, I can't get this thing right. Here we go. Not pressed in, but it's hitting that washer. Take the washer off now. And I can't quite get it all the way out of there. I'm gonna have to get a little punch and knock that out. So let me do that, and then I'll show you tapping the new part back in. Alright guys, so there's the new part and the old part. Look identical except for there's teeth that are gone right there, so that's what we're fixing. There's actually a roller bearing in this end here. Put a little bit of oil on this shaft just to help it slide in, and so I'm just gonna line it up. You don't even have to tap it in. It just slides right in there. Put this big washer back on. And then this snap ring, make sure it makes it all the way down to the groove. Alright, just like that. Fits in there perfect. Okay, now next I'm going to just unpackage this thing here, this whole part. We just needed this end piece, but it comes as a complete unit, so I bought that from CanAm. Got to looking around for used parts for these things, and there's not a whole lot on like eBay and all that for it, so I ended up just purchasing this stuff new from Partzilla actually, and really wasn't too bad expensive. I couldn't quote you the exact dollar figure on it right now, but it wasn't very expensive for what it is. I think this must be a pretty common problem, because Partzilla, they have to order some of their parts a lot of times, but in this case, these parts were in their warehouse, which is kind of odd for something internal transmission parts to be sitting around in a warehouse, but I can only assume that this is a common problem, so they had I had a set already ordered in, and so I got those. It was real quick shipping. Alright, so let me get this other part unboxed, and I'll show you sticking it in. Alright guys, here we are putting everything back together. Got an empty gear case here. This shaft here will need to be the first one to go in. It has a washer on the small end, nothing on the big end, so it slides right in this hole here, meshes up with that gear. And then this is the new part. This actually came as one assembled piece. Actually came with everything with the exception of the washers. I just took those off the old one, and it slides down in here on this bottom bearing, meshes up with this tooth, and that's pretty much it. You got your washer there. The only other thing you have to put back in is this shift shaft, and it goes in on that collar there. Ain't gonna work that direction. Let's see if I can get that thing fished around in there. Time to time you have to kind of play with the shift shafts to get them in right. Alright, let me see what I can do. I think I'm going to have to slide this one back out. I'm doing some armpit video in here. Slide that one out just a hair, put the shift shaft on. What you're trying to do here is get that nipple there lined up in the shaft, in the slot. Dang, this is some bad video work here, but we'll see if we can't get it in there in a second. Okay, there we go. So, actually probably be just as easy. See, I've never done one of these before, so I'm kind of learning from my mistakes. It'd be just as easy to install this shift, the actual shaft with all the gears on it, with the shift fork already in there. Stick it all in at one time. You want to make sure you don't lose that washer off of that back side back there, or lose the washer off the front side. I'm not even real sure where it is right now, so whoop, there it is. It fell out. See, that's not what you want to do. You want to get this below this shift drum. Just like that. And then here's the washer goes on the front side. And then what you do is you take your the shaft that the shift shaft slides on. You have to pick up on this thing a little bit, kind of get it in close to whatever gear, which I'm assuming this is in neutral. And then take and tap this shaft down till it bottoms out. It's just down. And that's it. I did not damage this gasket, as you can say. I don't know if, or as you can see, I don't know if I just got lucky or what. But I'm going to clean this up real good with some brake cleaner and just dab some RTV around it and seal it back up with the bolts. So that's the next order of business. Let me get that cleaned up a little, and I'll stick some bolts in it. So I got it started back on there. A little RTV on this back side here. You can tap it down. It's a little tight going over this shift shaft here. So Also, you wanted to turn this thing, once it gets down so far, turn this thing to make sure the gears mesh up, and then it's just a matter of tapping it down. So what do y'all think about that Mario song there tapped in? So anyway, that's it. You see it seated all the way up. So I'll stick all the bolts in and torque those down to 10 Newton meters, and probably going to go ahead and stick this sprocket on, and I'll probably go ahead and put the clutches on while I got it out here, just because it's a little easier to work with while sitting here on the bench. Go ahead and do that now, and that'll be less I have to do once I get it on the bike. Alright guys, now to put this sprocket on here, what you do is you slide the sprocket on, and then take this little collar, and you have to back it off just a little bit, but you rotate this collar in this groove until the bolt holes line up like that right there, and that's kind of a safety precaution to keep that thing from ever coming off there. And then I did put a little red Loctite on the 2 bolts that go in there, just to help hold them on. Got all the other bolts tightened up. Like I said, I'm going to flip over to the clutch side and throw the clutch on there too. So I'll cut back on when I get over there to the clutch. Alright guys, so I got the clutches on. Hardest thing about this is getting the belt on. Found about the easiest thing to do is stick a screwdriver in here and pry back to open this clutch up, and it'll let the belt, you can just fish the belt on there. So now there's a nut that goes on the outside here, as well as a O-ring that goes right over this shaft. Not real sure what the O-ring does, but I'll tighten that down, and then we will put the cover back on. This cover doesn't have any oil in it. This guy doesn't ride into water or anything with it, so it's got a gasket, and the gasket looks good. I'm not going to put any RTV or anything around that, because there's a good chance it's not going to leak. So let me get this bolt tightened up, or nut tightened up, and then we'll throw the bolts in the cover. So I got the clutch on the other side and the cover. Next order of business is putting this exhaust pipe on here. This thing is pretty aggravating to get this bottom bolt out, so I'm going to get it started first and probably end up using a ratchet wrench to run that one in. This other one, naturally, you can get it with just a socket. And what we're trying to line up here is this bolt hole here. This is where the shifter bracket goes in. I'll be putting that on next, but it's pretty tight here, and you can't get this exhaust off with it still on the bike. It's pretty complicated, so just figured I would take it off on the bench and put it back on the bench. That'll make it a little easier. Alright, let me get that put on there, and then I'll cut the camera back on. Alright guys, so I went ahead and bolted the shifter bracket on. It actually slips in there behind this exhaust bracket, so those two like number 3 Phillips head screws hold that in. And I'm gonna wait to put this bolt the shifter up after I get it in the bike, because I'm gonna slide it in from the left side, and this shifter will hit stuff as you go across the frame. So I'm just gonna leave that out for right now. And next order of business is sticking it back into the frame. Looks like we've got all our bolts here up the right side. We got next one's up the ground for the starter, and the case saver, which goes on the around the chain, and bolting the carburetor in, then the motor mount. So let me get the bike in here and we'll slide it in there. Alright guys, got the bike in here now, ready to slide this motor in. This thing's not real heavy. Like I said before, we're going to go in here from the left side over to the right, and see if we can't slide this thing in here. It seems like before, I can't really remember how I got it out of there, but we're just going to give it a shot. Slide it in. If it won't go, we'll try it in the other direction. For some reason, I'm thinking that the rear end came out first, but I may be wrong. So just slide this thing up, get the little boots out for the belt drive. They're in the way. it up over the motor mount, so I gotta get it slid forward a little bit here so this exhaust will clear. Just like that. Slide it around. The boot for the rear boot for the belt is hung up a little bit now. Fish it out of there. Okay. And I've got this rear motor mount I got to get around. The plastic. And that should be it. Now let me slide over here on the other side. Okay, it's almost in there. Rear a little bit. Let's see what we're hitting on. We're hitting on this rear motor mount on the frame. It needs to be picked up a little bit to get over that. And then that's pretty much it. Let's see, we got our front mount in there. The back one is almost in. It's got to go down. Actually, when I just touched it, it fell down. So that's in there. The front one over here is in. It's just low. And the bottom down here is very, very close. So pretty much it. Just sat it in there. So now I'm gonna get the cardboard and I guess start putting some bolts back in. Alright, one thing I'm gonna do before I get all these bolts in there is go ahead and put this chain on. I didn't take the master link out of it when I pulled the motor out. I just kind of stretched it over the sprocket, and in order for me to do that again, I'll probably have to have a little bit of slack in the motor there. So that's what I'm see if I can get this thing to go on there. There's a little spring-loaded tensioner type deal on this chain, which is different from most chains. You can actually make it stretch pretty good ways with that tensioner, but it looks like this motor is going to have to come back just a hair bit more in order for me to be able to get it on there. Let me see. Put it on here. Slide the motor back just a hair. Alright guys, so I got it halfway on there, and just roll the bike back and it pops right on. That little tensioner here, as you push down on it, it'll let it slide back in. I slid the motor back. You can see that motor mount down there is not lined up. So next thing to do is I'm going to bolt this carburetor back up, as well as bolt this, sorry for the bad camera work, bolt the carburetor back up to the intake, and bolt this ground wire back up to the starter here. Also need to bolt this power wire back to the solenoid, which is up under the side over there. And I'm going to do that real quick, and I'll cut the camera back on when I get that done. Yeah, so I got the carburetor bolted up, bolted the power wire back onto the, well, not power wire, the starter wire back onto the solenoid. Need to tuck it back up in here. There's actually a little holder for it down in this hole here. There's enough wire on there to get it fished around. And next thing to do, these other electrical connectors for the reverse and park, they're stuck up in here. I did mark those beforehand so I wouldn't get them mixed up, because they appear to be the same plug, which is kind of odd. But get those stuck back together. I was gonna see if the wires, yeah, I got a green wire on this one and a green and black on one side and green and black on the other. So that, well, no, that doesn't correlate because both of them's got green and black. So The only problem is if you hook these up wrong, the thing probably wouldn't crank unless you had it in reverse, or it would crank when you had it in neutral. So it'd just be a matter of switching those plugs around, but I just marked them so I wouldn't mess them up. And I can't get this socket in there, so I'm gonna have to cut the camera off to do it. Alright, so I got that on. Also, when I put all this together, I made sure this shift shaft was in the middle when I put it back in, so that should be our neutral position. Just took the bolt, I just stuck the bolt in here so I wouldn't lose it. Took the bolt out, and you can just tap this sleeve over this shaft now to get it tapped in there, and then stick your bolt back in to lock everything together. It's actually going to be kind of tough to get in there with that exhaust there, so I have to slide it out some to get the bolt started, but that's how you do it. And then I'm going to, there you go. Pretty tight tolerances here. The bolt will not go in there. Bolt will not go in there with it unless it's tapped all the way in. So anyway, let me get that bolt tightened up, and then I'm going to put the case saver back on, which is this piece right here. One tab you can see there is broken, so we only got one bolt that holds it on, so it goes in here, and that's just to keep it from, if the chain ever pops off, keep it from tearing up all kind of stuff as it flings it around. So that's where that goes. To bolt that on and bolt this cover, I guess that's kind of a heat shield safety cover thing for the chain. Bolt that on there too. And actually, I'm not going to bolt that cover on yet because I might not be able to get this engine bolt, I guess. So when I get the case saver back on, that tightened up, and these plugs plugged back in, I'm going to start sticking the engine bolts in on this side. Alright guys, so I got the bolts in here. They're not tightened up yet, so I will tighten them. Got this bottom motor mount bolt in here, as well as the top one here. They actually went in real easy. Just kind of pried up on this motor mount position here and got the bolt lined up, and then the other two were just about perfectly lined up when I did that. So I'm going to jump over to the other side, get these nuts on, and stick this other lower motor mount bolt in, and tie up any loose ends over on that side. I still got to put the intake on, the air box I mean, so I can do that from the other side, but let me jump over to the other side and we'll get that together. Guys, got it working. Went back together pretty good. Got it working. So y'all check out my other videos. Like I said, I've got another one of me pulling this motor, or taking the motor off of this one and tearing the transmission down. So y'all check that one out and hit that like button and subscribe. Check back with me.